Greetings, everyone. Barrett here with Hammerhead Model Making, and this episode is going to be dedicated to making a 1/48 scale Pacific Island diorama. And this is going to be part one in a series. At this point, I'm thinking it's going to be a three-part series. And this part one is going to focus on building up the actual diorama base and starting with kind of like the foliage and the ground and things like that. And as you can see here, this is for the Tamiya A6M2 that I built recently. That was sent to me by Sunward Hobbies. But I looked at a lot of pictures online, so this isn't going to be necessarily like trying to replicate any one specific location, but just kind of to be a generic location. And I'm kind of trying to do this one on the cheap. Not and the reason I'm doing that is just trying to find inexpensive products and materials that can produce a decent looking, diorama. So here I'm just using some floral foam and some hardware store epoxy to glue that down. And this is going to kind of create the basic structure of the groundwork. I definitely wanted to avoid doing anything like relatively flat, which is usually what I've done in a lot of my past dioramas. They always kind of are on a single plane. So for this one, I really wanted to have some like elevation, and I found some really great reference pictures of Zeros in the Pacific on island bases, and there was some really cool ones where they were like surrounded by these small like sand dune type structures with this really tall grass growing out of it, and I kind of liked the look of that because it's just different than what I've done before, and I wanted to add a lot of verticality to this diorama. So once the epoxy dried and the foam, I'm covering everything with this plaster. And then this is just like your basic craft hobby store generic, plaster of Paris type stuff. I've mixed it a little on the thin side. I didn't want it to be like super pasty, and just kind of spread it all over. And then while it's still drying, I'm inserting these little wooden craft sticks. And I think I picked up a bag of like 200 of these sticks for under $5 at the local craft store. They're relatively inexpensive, but they do a good approximation of timber to kind of create like a temporary hard stand for the aircraft. And so I kind of had to. You can see me at the end, kind of rushing it a little bit because I noticed that the plaster was starting to dry, and now I'm just sprinkling some dirt into the plaster, and that's going to help give it some texture. And then we're going to paint the whole thing black, and I'm just using like a black Krylon primer. I'm not using any of my expensive hobby primers for this. Just take it out to the garage, hit it with your black primer. And now I'm using this like faux fir as my long grass, and I had seen someone else do like similar, using like teddy bear fur to replicate like tall grass on dioramas in 1/35 scale. So I figured, it wouldn't hurt. And the reason why I chose white is because in my mind, I figured that would be easier to paint, so that I could paint it up to the green like I'm doing here. And I'm just airbrushing the Tamiya paint directly onto the fur. It works. It's kind of tricky because like as you're painting it, you have to make sure that you're opening, like what I'm doing here. I'm just using like an old airbrush needle to kind of open up the fur a little bit so I can get in between. I had to do that a few times to really get like full saturation color on the fur, but this is kind of like where I wanted to go. And the airbrushing process also kind of helps to like create random shapes and movement in the grass as opposed to like all laying in one specific direction. At this point, I'm just going to super glue it directly onto the base that I've already done. And now I'll do things to like blend it in a little bit more. You'll see those in a little bit, but this is just kind of getting me in the direction that I want to go. And I'm just using super glue to apply this. And actually, like, it soaks into the fabric material pretty well. And then, it adheres to the plaster really nicely. So I wasn't worried about it going anywhere, but so we get that all applied. And then now what I'm going to do is using some matte Mod Podge, and this is basically just like super PVA glue, but it dries clear and matte, which is nice and not like shiny like normal Elmer's glue. And this I'm going to use to apply shorter static grass to kind of blend in the edge of the longer grass. And I there's all sorts of like narrative explanations why you could get like maybe they had to cut down this grass here to make sure the airplane could fit. Normally it would be longer, or whatever. There's different narrative reasons why you could explain why things are the way they are and how they look. But again, this is really kind of like this whole project is like an exercise in experimentation and just kind of seeing what I'm capable of and what I can do. So at this point, we're going to start painting all of our groundwork, and I'm starting with this brown color. I really I wanted to portray like a dusty, sandy, kind of what you would picture South Pacific Island, you know, earth to look like. So I'm starting with this brown color, and then I'll work my way up a couple of lighter shades until I'm happy with the overall look and color and tone. But this is a good base color to start with if you're going in the direction of like a lighter sand color. If I was doing like a darker earth, I would have started with a much darker brown and maybe worked my way up to this color. But I'm not necessarily being super careful. Like you can see I'm getting some paint on the grass, stuff like that. That's okay, because we're going to be painting the grass later. So now I'm going to hit the dirt with a khaki color. And this is essentially going to act as like my mid-tone. What I really wanted to have was like a lot of tonal variation in the groundwork, so that it's not just one like flat uniform color. I really wanted it to be some depth and variety to it. And we're going to finish off with this deck tan. So this is going to be like my final, quote unquote sand color. But I'm also going to use this as well to paint the wood. But for the sand, I'm kind of just like misting it on. I'm not like full body spraying it, but when I do the wood planks, I will full body spray that, so that it will give the appearance of like almost a different color. And so that's kind of like a fun way you can use the same color in two different applications in a scene like this, because it also helps like tie everything together and not make it look quite so dramatic, as it were. So now we're going to bring our deep green back, and then we're going to start painting all of our shorter grass here. And this is going to help blend it in, at least from a color standpoint, with the longer grass. Try to make it a little bit more, seem like it's more cohesive. And I realized later on that it ended up being too monotone, and so I'm gonna take steps to rectify that later. So on Amazon, I found a bag of 100 of these little plants, and they're just little plastic plants, and it was like $9, I think, for 100 pieces. And they have a couple varieties you can see here, and using that same green we were using on the grass, I'm just kind of misting it onto the plants to take down that like plasticky shine, and again to help like blend it in with the rest of the scenery, the greenery that I'm doing. And it's definitely not like the most realistic looking plants out there, but they were inexpensive, cheap, jungle-y looking plants. So now I'm hitting the grass. Like I said, I mentioned that I realized that the grass was looking too monotone, so I'm just hitting it with a little bit of the Imperial Japanese gray green, same color we actually used on the Zero itself, to kind of add some light streaks and highlights into the grass. I did purchase some like trees, scale trees from my local hobby shop. I apologize, I didn't get any footage of the actual packaging for it because I've had it for a couple of years, but they're just basically like I want to say it's like that seafoam plant material, I think is what it is. And then I just painted it, wrapped a bunch of sticks together to kind of create these tree structures. And I'm actually drilling holes directly into the plaster. And what's nice is the craft, or the floral foam, does a really good job of capturing, like as I poke these down in and capturing the plants, so that once you get them in with a little bit of super glue, they're not going anywhere. But here I'm just kind of populating the brush, just trying to create more foliage and just cool sense of like, this is a busy place, it's a jungle, they've made this hastily prepared airfield, and that's right on the edges, kind of a thing. So I'm happy with it. I wanted to add a little bit more weathering to the wooden planks, so I'm going to use this color Iraqi sand from Vallejo to add like what I would imagine would like scratches and areas where like the weathered wood would show more like fresh exposed wood. And it also helps slightly differentiate the color. And then now I'm going to use this Citadel Agrax Earth shade to create like oil splotches and drips and stains on the wooden areas here. And you can see initially I'm flicking it with the little wooden skewer there. I eventually just changed to my tactic there, but using the sponge I can kind of dab away at some of the larger splotches so they don't look quite so, like huge globs. And but just wanted to create some randomness, and then what I'm going to do here is do like a little more targeted approach, adding oil stains directly underneath where the engine would be. And and then I'm going to do that another layer with Nuln Oil, which is like a more black shade. And I'm also going to use the Nuln Oil to create a little bit more contrast between some of the features on the base, like the wooden planks to the dirt and some of the grass areas. Just helps create a little bit more like shadow effect and depth, and trying to really confine it to like wherever there would be like corners, like sharp corners between like the wood and the dirt, or if there's like a particularly dense area of grass or whatever. That's what I'm trying to do. I mean, it was okay enough, I guess. So yeah, so that's really kind of it for the groundwork. So parts 2 and 3 are going to focus on doing figure painting, and then kind of finishing off the overall diner. I still need to finish off like behind on the sides, and where it's just black, right? Like I want to clean that up and create a nice edge around and border around the whole thing. But as far as like the actual foliage and the groundwork, it's done, and I'm pretty happy with it. I like where it's going to go. I will most likely make slight changes and tweaks to it as I go along. But the part 2 will be figure painting, and then, like I said, part 3 will be kind of putting everything together, final touches, and the final presentation. So I hope you enjoyed this. Just so you know, this is actually a shortened version. I have a longer version of this video over on my Patreon. If you're interested in these types of like very targeted how-to videos, I've got a decent library of those types of videos on my Patreon that go way more into depth. I mean, I think the Patreon version is about 45 minutes long. And so huge shout out to the patrons I do have currently who do support this channel, because it helps me bring this type of content to you. And so finally, if you're not yet a subscriber to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next video.